right. Welcome everyone to our very first independent designer discussion. We here at Indieverse like to not only have a space for you guys to facilitate your growth in the independent tabletop space, but we also like to educate, bring you some info from people from different spaces, whether they're veterans, first timers, or people who just have some interesting ideas as far as creating and growing as a tabletop designer. Today, I have a very special, very close friend of mine, Mr. Mark Beren from Armoured Gaming, has a wonderful podcast out that you should all listen to. We'll chuck it into the show notes as well. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I am awesome, Dylan. How you doing today?
Oh man, the nerves of doing something like this is definitely kicking in, but give it 5 minutes. I'm sure we'll forget it's here.
I'm here for you. Let's have a good chat about all the great things about role-playing games.
Oh man, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Like I said, if you haven't listened to Mark's podcast, he goes in depth. There's some great games that I'd never heard of and some concepts that will blow, hopefully, some of your minds. But before we do all that, let's start off a little bit about you. So tell us, Mark, who are you? What do you do? What do you love?
Yeah.
Why are you here?
Well, what do I love? Well, I love tabletop role-playing games. I also love board games and computer games and things like that. But my true passion is definitely tabletop role-playing games. There's nothing better. Definitely my preference is actually sitting at the table, although I know that a lot of people play online nowadays. I don't quite get the same vibe out of that atmosphere. So I really like to play sitting down at the table with the people all around me from there. I'm almost always the GM. I write games. I design games. People sometimes talk to me and ask me for design advice on their games and things like that. I give feedback and we all sort of high five each other on the way out the door and that sort of stuff as well. So as well as that, as you mentioned, I also do have a teeny tiny little podcast. I definitely have two listeners. One of them is Dylan, your great host here, and the other one is my mum, who doesn't know anything about role playing games, but she's really supportive. So that's great too. So I guess that's what I do. Role playing, and I guess by day my profession is teacher for my students. That's where I am.
Amazing, man. Amazing. Yeah, well, look, I can at least tell you that I've passed on your podcast to a couple of people. So if there's at least 3 to 4, I can take a little bit of credit for those ones.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I've always really enjoyed about the creative space when it comes to tabletop games. Like, there's always, and you mentioned it yourself, there's always like someone who's willing to throw their hat in and give you either advice or just taking a read through to make sure that the sanity's in there when you put these things together. Yeah, so I mean, it's something. How long have you been doing it for, man? Because from the way you talk about them, the experiences that I've heard from your time in the podcast, like it feels like it's been doing it forever. Like you rocked up and it's just there.
Oh, well, I guess I've been doing this since rocks were a lot hotter and softer. Back when the continents were still trying to form into their places. No, I'm not that old. I'm not one of the original sort of Dungeons Dragons generations. I still have at least most of my hair is still dark. But no, I guess I got into it fully in high school, right when. Just to really date myself here, I finished high school and then back in the year 2000, and right at that point is when Baldur's Gate came out and Baldur's Gate 2, and those games were just like completely influential to me, and they were wonderful, absolutely incredible, especially because they came with this little ring binder manual, right? And you could read this ring binder manual, and little did I know, because I had no idea that Dungeons and Dragons was really a thing back in those days. I didn't understand it. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anyone who'd ever played it. And so I'm reading these little manuals, and I'm like, they're talking about rolling a dice, like in the like. And then back in those days, you'd excitedly read the manual while the game was still installing, because it'd take about 45 minutes to install back on a 486 or a Pentium or whatever. And you're reading the manual with bated breath, and I'm reading these rules, going like, wait, do I roll a dice and then put in a number or something? Like, surely no. And of course it wasn't that, but it had basically the rules of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in there, because that's what the system's based on. And so from there, this sort of love of fantasy, I was always a fantasy reader and stuff, but this love of role-playing games sort of sprung out from there, and myself and some close friends got together and played these games. I wasn't originally the main DM, but I couldn't help but sort of drift into that role. So and that's basically Yeah, so about the year 2000 or so, mostly played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons back in those days. I didn't really know that any of the other stuff even existed, although since then I've sort of gone back and learned heaps of stuff, read all of the stuff that was coming out in the 80s and the 90s and this brilliant stuff that was coming out. But at that time, I only really had access to some of the comic book stores here in Brisbane, and they only had Dungeons and Dragons, and they might have had one or two other things, but I didn't want to be that sort of that fruity guy who only played like indie games or anything, and yet here I am writing indie games. So, but yeah, so I think the first indie game I ever played was Godlike by, if I remember correctly, Greg Stolze, and it blew my mind that you could do stuff other than with like 20-sided dice and that sort of stuff from there. So yeah, I guess I've been around for a long time, but more than anything, I read a lot of role-playing games. I play as much as I can, but I'm a dad with kids and that sort of stuff, so I can't really play all the time, especially not now that I'm not young anymore. But I just love that, I read these things when I have spare time. I try to look at their design decisions and I go, well, why did they make that decision? How would that actually affect the story that takes place, or the game, or the mechanics, or whatever that takes place? So yeah, I guess I have been doing it for a little while now. So, and I have read I've tried to read all of the classics to get where they're coming from, to see things, and or just, Lord of the Rings or any of those things. And I'm reading that and I'm like, wow, this whole genre of cyberpunk stuff exists. And so obviously I went in there and I read a bunch of other books on there, Netrunner or Snow Crash for sort of Neil, forgot his last, Stevenson, I think his name is, just to get the vibes. And because when you're running a game, especially, you kind of want to get the vibes, you want to get the ideas of where and how these things are set up, or the places they're put in to get to give you the idea of what and where and how, because that's what really sort of gets the players to sit at the table and like really feel like they're there. If I can at least in a few words express that there's an arcology over a flooded river or something like that, with huge steel pylons underneath, that there's a whole shanty town of cyberpunk marketeers underneath, then people get this idea in their mind, but I wouldn't have had that idea unless I'd read some of these ideas of cyberpunk or poverty and wealth and some of those sorts of things. So yeah, I guess I do a fair bit of research, at least as much as I can nowadays, though. But the big thing is, before I run a game, and especially before I write a game, I really I throw myself deeply into it. And I'm writing a samurai game at the moment, and so I think I've seen every bad samurai TV series from the 70s onwards, and they're no longer bad for me. Now they're just amazing, right? They're just amazing in all of their weird cinematographical sort of styles and shot cuts and things like that. And I'm like, wow, why did you do that? And then I read about it, or why they did it, or the directors or whatever. So yeah, I guess I do personally do a lot of research into these things when I am doing it. But at the same time, everyone comes to the table already having a lot of knowledge. So it's not that, and a lot of that knowledge, it's nice to refresh it as you're getting into the game, or writing it, or even just playing it, just to refresh that, so where you are, what you're doing, so you can jump into that genre, into those tropes really strongly and effectively.
It's nice to have, like, and I've been thinking about this as I've started to sort of venture out with beyond going D&D, which I know heresy to some people out there, but I've also started to venture out there with, like, even reading and style. Like, I was much like yourself. Like, I read Lord of the Rings when I was a young man. I still really think it's a great novel. I think the writing itself is a little bit long in the tooth, and I think a lot of people might.
Years, I can forgive a 70 years of writing changes, right? So, it's very different. So, but that's okay.
Revive Tolkien, get him to rewrite it in today's language, and it would be a whole different novel.
Yeah, probably be 200,000 words rather than however many it actually is.
Yeah,
but
yeah, that's it. Yeah. So yeah,
I think all that stuff on like Hobbit Society would have been downloadable content. But anyway,
yeah, probably, and all those sects of men and the orcs and stuff like that, like they're all and the people of the north that never get touched in the books, well, not in the base series, like I can see it just going a bit crazy. It's an interesting space, and I think that as we grow as like a community to like learning about different things, like with like you say, cyberpunk coming from Netrunner, which is a really old novel. And I'm sure that we could find other parallels that are sort of sitting in there, like Blade Runner is always sort of like that hybrid in the middle that was really popular from the Philip K. Dick novel. I'm 90% sure it's a
Spring of Electric Sheep. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a brilliant novel, and it's almost nothing like the movie, so it's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So like, it's interesting that there's so much inspiration drawn, yet not drawn. Like they either take a theme or like a topic or something around like character development and stuff, which I know is a massive thing in a whole part of RPGs that I never went into, and I'm actually really enjoying diving into now. It's been actually really interesting. Guilty made my first Call of Cthulhu character the other day, and it was honestly way more exciting than I thought could be done for like a first timer. I find I almost get myself stuck into the mechanics. I'm like, okay, what do I want my character to sort of look like to be from a skill perspective? But I actually got the chance to make a character with my partner, and she and I are playing a 56 and 57-year-old best friends who used to be nurses, now run a florist and a draper, which is kind of like what Spotlight was. Yeah. So for someone who loves playing like weird and quirky and usually bard characters, because I play D&D, it's kind of nice to play something against type for me. Yeah, so it's been very fun to sort of dip my toes into little bits here and there.
Oh, the best part of Cthulhu, really. Like there is an era in Cthulhu if you play like I don't know, some sort of super soldier with a rocket launcher. It's not as fun. You know that you're going to get eaten by Cthulhu or whatever, regardless. But you know you're going to. It's more fun if you're a florist, a 57-year-old florist who still has to deal with all of those problems, but doesn't have I don't know super spy training or any of those things. Like you don't even you know you have to deal with the fact that your way to achieve things in that is literally you have to go out to your social circle and negotiate, and you have to sort of work within that social sphere rather than necessarily considering that I'm going to be some sort of super soldier who can blow up Cthulhu with a rocket and a steamship or something like that. But
yeah, just the feeling of not being a hero, that really humanizing element of it all. I'm loving it so much. And there's a lot of just the approach that we take, and even playing like meeting people who've played it before, even the way they take it after a couple of years of having played, like they take it in the much same vein. So I feel like it's good at directing players without like being like, now you put this down in here and you do this, and this is how you make this kind of character. It inspires those like creativities, and I really liked the wording of the creativity where they're like, oh, go out, you should go out and like Google it, go research, go look. I went and found a census to find out, because we were like, oh, it's a haberdashery, because our modern interpretation of a haberdashery is like what a draper would be, which is like selling the fabrics, not really putting them together. But back in the day, a haberdashery was like what we would call a tailor these days, like a men's tailor. So the definition has changed, and we were like out there hunting for stuff that fits the character that my partner wanted to play. So yeah, it's in the same way, like you've researched the game when you're not even running it. Like you research the era, even though it's not something that you that you take usually from D&D, because D&D gives you everything in the books most of the time. And I draw that because it's just the one I know the most. But yeah, it was very, very, I guess, eye-opening in a lot of ways. And as a young role player, I say that after like 7 years, it feels like not that long. It's just yeah, I think it's about how interested you are in going out to find those other things as well. And like, interest in finding new things, whether it's a narrative, whether it's a game, is always something that we really, I think that comes to creatives no matter what you do. You kind of just find a thing and you stick with it.
Yeah, if something latches onto you, definitely, you find more. But there's a game called Ars Magica, which has been around for a billion years now. It's a game where you play powerful wizards. Everyone's a powerful wizard, but it's interesting in there. They have there's a sort of a list of how much you research the game before you go in there, because it's set in actual medieval Europe. It's just they call it mythic Europe because magic also exists, right? But it's interesting because they go, look, there's a couple of different levels that you could go when you're playing this game. And the first one is don't do any research and call the King of England William the Bastard. And if anyone argues, you just say it's a game, man, just deal with it. And then the highest tier is like go to university and get a history degree in medieval studies, and it's like exactly where do you want to sort of push this sort of angle, and how much you research. At the end of the day, I always find the more, if you are researching your game, you're playing your game, really, especially if you're the GM. But even if you're a player, the more you look into it, or the more you, and even with D&D, people searching up spells or stat blocks or feats or any of those things, they
Yeah.
are playing the game. They're just not at the table, but they are interacting with the game in some way, and they're making some sort of choice in their mind, or have the ability to make later choices based on their research. So what the game is doing is that in their mind, they're still interacting with, connecting with that game in some way. So I don't think in any way research is a bad thing. In fact, I think for a lot of people, especially your more serious type of gamers who do that research, they're the ones who are going to benefit from it. The other people at the table are also going to benefit from it, because the research isn't going to hurt anyone unless, well, I can't imagine it would, but the research isn't going to hurt anyone. Uh, but I don't want to take away from like casual gamers who just want to have a play, show up, have a good time and go. Regardless, if there's a GM or a player who's done heaps of research, that adds to the game. And someone who just comes in and plays the game and just and does their best with who they are, well, that's cool too. I think it all adds into the game experience. So it whether you do that research or not, if you do it, you get to play the game more. If you don't do it, you still get to play the game at the table. And you still have a great time. So it's good.
I think that's the thing I honestly like most about roleplay games. And I hadn't thought of it in the perspective of like, as soon as you start researching or engaging with the content in any form or fashion, like that's you playing with it. That's you taking the time and energy, during our busy lives to engage with something that you get to be creative with or just learn a lot about and then bring it to the table. And you talk about people who don't come to the table doing their research, but they get to learn by others and then they get to find out. And that little thing they learn at the table, maybe that piques them to become a research player as well. Like there's always a bit of change and moving and that through through the spaces. Different friends as well, different people. Like I go playing and running in 3 different groups, and I never met 2 of those groups before we started playing something together. And we've been friends for six almost 7 years. Most of the time I've been playing D&D. It's a fascinating thing. I have often thought about doing and trying to teach, I guess, or even play these sort of games with people who are looking to be creative writers. I've done a couple of sessions with like actors and stuff, and it's always a fun and interesting experience when they don't know anything. I'm like, this is the character you're playing. This is sort of what their deal is. Have fun with it. So yeah, it's very much all walks of life kind of deal. I've always tried to get my parents to play something really dumb and silly as well, and they haven't bought it yet, but hopefully someday so they can understand what all the time and energy I've put into this little hobby. Well, I say massive hobby now that I've dug myself into.
Yeah. It's a big one. It's a lifestyle, really. You get get casual gamers who sort of come in and test the waters a little bit, but most of the people who stick around are definitely your serious gamer types anyway, who invest as a part of their lifestyle, as part of their person, in the same way that you have people who invest in sport or in any hobby really, your real serious hobbyists, I guess, that make it a part of their life and who they are. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, I mean, it's enjoyable. It's what people want to get out of the game. So yeah,
That's it. And it brings people together. Which, like, I don't. Little younger than you, not going to share mine, but I finished. Well, I'll share the same you did. I finished high school in 2007, 2008, I believe, something like that. It's been, yeah. And the thing then was like you didn't have the variety, like the space to do all of this when we grew up, because like it wasn't as big as it is now. There's a lot of like people out there, and finding the right people to do it was even harder. Now you can jump on forums. Like I said, I met 12 people that I now call very close friends through this thing, through just message boards and places where people want to do it. So it's great for building communities, which us as nerds, I growing up in the 80s, 90s, wherever we were, wasn't great. Like it's hard for us to do it. So yeah, look, nothing else that brings that sense of community.
Yeah. And I think here in Australia, at any rate, I'm not in Melbourne, in Brisbane here. So it wasn't even that being, nerdy was a problem or anything like that. I think everybody's a nerd in some way, but or your interests or role playing, there was never any issue with it. It's just that there weren't that many people who you could easily find in the area, and without message boards or being in the right social circles. And to be honest, to be in the right social circle, you kind of got to be there at the right time at the right place to be able to get sort of hoiked into those sorts of things. And if you just don't get those opportunities, then they pass you by, because if you never meet someone from, I don't know, the SCA or something, you'll never get into the whole world of LARPing or role playing or any of that sort of stuff. You'll just never hear about it from anybody else. So you really got to you kind of have to get kind of lucky here. Whereas in my mind, I imagine that the 90s and the 2000s and stuff, at least in America, you could go into a game shop and you could at least negotiate to find a game or something like that. But I remember going into a game shop and asking about joining a game, and the people there just had no idea how to even set me up on how to even get started in
Yep.
gaming. And so I was like, wow, that's I would love to play these games. I'd be interested in them. And I've heard of Baldur's Gate or whatever. But they were like, oh no, we don't really know how to set you up in a game or get other people or how to do that. And I was like, oh wow, okay. So I just had to do it yourself back in those days. So that's the bad old days. The good old days nowadays is that you go onto Discord, and within 5 minutes you could have about 8 people wanting to play Dungeons and Dragons, if that's what you want to play.
Yeah, it's crazy, and the COVID years really sort of made that really eye-opening as well. I mean, like, it's a great thing for, especially for like the developing cycle, I think, because no doubt you go to, and I've noticed this in the time that I've been in the communities for designers, creators, publishers, like everyone in the space, everyone is so communicative there, and I almost go through the history of it. I'm like, how long have these spaces been available and like alive? And it is like that 2019, 2020, where everyone, they couldn't go to their local game store or just talk to their mates who did it, or all the cons and that. And this environment just grew naturally. And we see so many questions and people asking queries on there. It's amazing. And that's a little bit what inspired what we're doing today, like just talking a little bit about tabletop games and everything in between. So yeah, I think it's really kind of heartwarming, because like I had an opportunity to be a creative in the video game space in the early 2000s or 2010s, but the opportunity wasn't there. There was not much funding. There was about 2 or 3 studios that would actually, have a decent paycheck. One of them was EA, and I didn't want to go work for them. So yeah. So like now is like the crowdfunding era is a thing. We have so many opportunities for people to come in and be creative in this space. And it's about building community, finding people who love this thing as much as you do. And it's so easy these days. So yeah, I think it's a blessing, a real blessing for a lot of people who just want to make cool stuff, whether they want to make $1 million business or whether they just want to make cool games because they like making cool games.
I think everyone would love to have $1 million, but let's be realistic. I'm satisfied when I make a reasonable game and it gives me enough money to fund another game. So.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we really enjoyed about like crowdfunding and what inspired us to make the independent marketplace that we've been working on. Because it doesn't have to be something that we're like, oh, yeah, you've got this game, it's going to make you this amount of money and this amount of things. Like, it's not always about that. Sometimes it's just about putting something out there that you've put a lot of love into, a lot of creativity, and even if it doesn't make you $1 million, someone can go out in 5 years, 10 years, and be like, never heard of this before, and they can pick it up off a shelf. It's like preservation. There's a big movement at the moment for preservation of video games that you may or may not be aware of, where they're shutting off old servers and old games are getting deleted and stuff. And there's a lot of people who are really upset about it, and rightly so. Stuff that they've grown with, it's nostalgia for them. It's something they've connected to at certain times in their life. Like, it holds significance to people.
I mean, not Gallagher, but I imagine that somehow Gallagher gets deleted off all of the old things, and then somehow Gallagher is gone forever. This isn't a matter of gaming or particularly like fun or anything anymore. This is literally a part of history that would have been deleted. So in the same way that if I don't know, I broke a Roman plate, it would be the same sort of concept, except perhaps not quite as old. But if I deleted Gallagher from the world, then I think the world would miss a point of history from that we have gone through, and was really important and meaningful to a lot of people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though like the games that you make, the games that anyone that we ever speak to make, may never be at the heights of like what Gallagher has to shift the needle in the tabletop space, it's important enough to you and to the people that you've worked with and people who love the games and space that you work in. So I don't think that getting rid of that is something that we should do. Like, I think it's something that you worth preserve. It's not very hard for you to keep a hold on. You've got all the stuff to make it. A lot of time people have like resin molds, prints and stuff, and they just go on a shelf, and it's a real shame. And that's sort of where we want to, I guess that's the next sort of side of things. Like, we've talked about tabletop games creation and that. So how do you find the creative juice? What got you to the space where you were like, I want to make games, and even if I'm not trying to make my million, I just want to make the next game out there? What got you there? What inspired?
Okay, so as I said before, I played Dungeons and Dragons for a very long time, and while I dipped in and out of indie games, for the most part, Dungeons and Dragons is where I was at. I played a huge, ridiculous campaign of what I said before, Ars Magica, of many years, and that it finally broke me the idea that Dungeons and Dragons is the main game that, and the other games are things that you might try, right? And I go, oh, okay. So there's other things that become, important as you need them, but when, not to get too much into Ars Magica, but in that game, you played powerful wizards, and there is a sort of this mechanical research process where you can create magic items of pretty much any type that you like. There's a couple of basic rules, like you can't break time or go back in time, or a few other little things.
Some staples, yeah.
But if you're like, okay, so I want a wand of fireball, that's no problem at all. I want a miniature house that turns into a big house with all of its stuff in it that I literally want to put on the ground and it grows up and then I can sleep in it, and then I come out of it and it shrinks down again. Yeah, we can make that item too. Do we understand? Like, so if you have the idea, then you can find an item, you give it a shape, you give it some magical powers, you compare it to your own statistics. But when you do that, when you have to design all of this magical stuff with the base rules, and
Okay.
so any game kind of does this, even way back like Hero and stuff like that. You are engaging in a design process. Anytime that you make a new monster for Dungeons and Dragons, you're looking at the base scores, you're looking at the back of the the monster manual or whatever, and you're going, well, this is how to create a new monster. Effectively, you are designing something. You are trying to put in some sort of creative aspect into to do something new, to achieve some goal that you think will help from your audience, which is your players, right? And so, at least with Ars Magica, I was doing that on a weekly basis,
Oh, wow.
to the point. Well, I was playing it weekly, and it was, it's one of those crazy games where I would have 12 people show up to my tiny apartment, and they're all, and I didn't even have enough chairs, and there were just people like coming in, and I'd stay there for like 12 hours. It was just crazy, but they just sometimes games just become, I don't know, ways of life, but anyway, when you do this, you sort of become a designer. So you move from just a GM who takes a published adventure or something like that, and you run that published adventure, and you have a good time, and there's nothing wrong with that. You move from that to someone who goes, okay, so I'm going to create new things. I'm going to, or you might half and half it, and you go, okay, so I've got a published adventure, and there's a thing in there, and I just don't like it, so I'm going to change it to something else. So you start that design process, and so I was doing that for a very long time and then eventually Tuesday nights, just a couple of me and a couple of my friends, we would just play board games or small role playing games as we go through testing out different indie games, that sort of stuff. And what happened now as a mixture, there's another game called Traveller, which has a life path system where when you create your character, you roll on all these charts and it'll tell you what character you end up with. Okay, so you'll be like, oh, okay, I've got this sort of strength or intelligence or whatever, and then I try to join up in the Marines, and I get kicked out of the Marines, and then I get a dishonorable discharge because I punched an officer, and then I join the Merchant Navy, and then I own a ship, and so sort of have all of this life that happens prior to actually playing the game proper. Now, with that idea in my mind, what I did is I took 5th edition and I went, okay, I read this article called, I think, it was like low-level characters by the Alexandrian, low-level characters or tier 1 characters or level 5 characters or something like that, from the Alexandrian blog. And I got really inspired to run low-level games because at the end of the day, as soon as D&D hits a certain level, the wheels fall off and the game becomes boring. I think essentially because there's too many hit points and there's no risk to players anymore, no to play characters, right? So if a dragon can breathe fire on me, well, and I can basically stand there and take it, then and not be worried about that, then at the end of the day, I am not emotionally invested particularly, other than go, well, I just hope that doesn't happen again. As opposed to if I have to deal with that same dragon and I'm level 1, then I am thinking hard, I'm problem solving in every possible way. Like, can I take cover behind this thing over here or whatever? So with that idea in mind, I went, I would like to play a game where we start out as 0 level people, and we slowly like get all of our various different abilities until eventually we get to level 1. Okay, so we played a whole campaign, and so I wrote a whole rule set. You can buy it on DM's Guild actually, called 0 Level Gaming, and so every little milestone. So you have a little adventure. You all start as zero level people with like 4 hit points. You can't do anything, and the ones who and then but what I added on top of this sort of system was time passing, because as magic has a lot of time passing, years will pass between adventures in that way. Your wizards sit in their laboratories researching magic or making magic items, right? So what I did in this Dungeons and Dragons game was this 0 level Dungeons and Dragons game. Is I went, okay, so we're going to have a little adventure, and then I'm going to have a year passes, and then in that year passes, I'm going to create some tables, and we're going to roll on some tables based off that traveler life path system. And
Okay.
Right. And we're going to then tell the tale of what happens to our tiny little village where our 0 level people are. Okay. And I started in the Forgotten Realms, and so we sort of had these great stories about these people who were just levies in an army and managed to get through and settled in this little town, and they got wives and they had kids, and there was plagues, and some of their, like a kid died, or just these little stories that were passing as time goes on. And it took about 10 years or so, and they finally got to level 1. But by that time, they had sort of earned level. And at the end of that process, I realized that I had designed a game. So I designed a module to be able to replicate that process of moving from just a guy to a hero. And because a level 1 person is so significantly better than anyone else, any 0 level commoner, right? There is a significant divide between them. I go, well, let's bridge that gap and let's tell that tale of what happens. But I don't want to tell the tale of the level 1 to level 5 adventurer and they save the kingdom. I want to tell the tale of how one person chooses to be a hero in a difficult environment, and how they managed to get there. And so that was my first little thing that I ever did, and it really was just a thing that I was making for fun at the table half the time, just basically making up the tables, making up the rolls as we were going through, and then I just make the notes and write it down, run it past my friends, and they'd be like, "Yeah, that sounds good," or "We'll make a little bit of a change." So it was really helpful that they were there I could bounce something off. So that's where that first little thing came from, and eventually I put it together and made a little campaign for it, and yeah, so that was my first little design thing that hits on DM's Guild, and it still gets me like I don't know, $10 a month or something, I guess, as people come in and buy it. So yeah, but it was a good little. That was where I got started, and then as soon as I got started, I realized that I enjoyed creating the system and the game, and seeing that story system show up in the game and people play it. I enjoyed that as much as I did actually playing the game, if not more, because I could see that my system was making other people have a good time, and I really enjoyed that process. So, and from there, I just kept writing stuff. I made extra campaigns, and then I went into an indie game entirely and made my big game night. So yeah, I guess that's my little design history.
Yeah, amazing. I think that I guess I always tell people I'm not a designer or a creator in the tabletop space, but I guess that's a lie with the way that you sort of described it. I running a homebrew campaign of a world that a friend of mine helped me make in a game called A Quiet Year, which is it's a basic 52 card.
I like Quiet Year. Yep.
Fantastic. I loved it.
A lot of ideas from it. Yeah.
Yeah, great ideation, great place, especially if you've got more than one head together. I think we had 6 people all up that have like investment in like playing the game and sort of creating like the people, the places, the history of the world that we built. And we made a whole campaign. I think there's like 3 or 4 different campaigns that sort of run simultaneously across different parts of that world. It's great. It's fantastic. And taking that and putting it into a character perspective, like you made a whole game of what most people would call a session 0, where you start getting the pieces together, figuring out how the party found each other, where they grew up, how they did it, and you made that into an experience for a group. So it's almost like they're playing 2 roleplay games, the one to find out how they get to the roleplay game, and then they get to figure out how they're playing the roleplay game on top of that. And I think that those that struggle with like the creative background, like doing backgrounds and stuff, and they find that all too laborious, so that could be a way to do that, to like bring that creative nature into it, where they don't have to think about doing it on their own and they get bored and stuck into it. They get to do it as a team. And again, that collaborative space.
I find with because all my games that I'm writing are a lot more creative, and every player contributes a lot. So a lot of games, especially like D&D is the big one for this, and I pick on D&D, but I mean it's what's got a traditional game. So you've got a DM whose job is to be the storyteller and the arbiter and everything else, right?
Mm.
And so a lot of players get the feeling that they are the user of the system and the GM is the system.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so if you feel like you're a user, then you sort of feel entitled to get the thing out of it. Okay,
yeah.
but I would argue that games are a lot more collaborative than that, and that players don't know they can be a lot more so to add stuff into the story. And a lot of traditional GMs can be quite combative on that, and they want to sort of hold that storytelling aspect and say, no, this is my role, and your role is to sit there and just be there in the story.
Yeah, yeah.
Where I would say I think more modern games will say, "Oh, hang on, no, let's." Everybody is creative, but not everybody is creative all the time. And there's a game called Microscope, which is an amazing little game where you sort of tell these tiny little stories, little bit by little bit, over a large framework. And as the game goes on, the little stories kind of add together to make up stuff, to make up the whole thing. And then you've got this
Okay.
realization of this grand epic story that was in fact made up by all these tiny little pieces that you made. And so it is quite doable to make a tiny piece of a story. And when everybody is making those tiny pieces, you get a better aspect of it. But if one person is the one who wants to take on that role of making all those tiny pieces, and if everybody else thinks it's a big job to make because I have to make every tiny piece, then unfortunately I think games can suffer from that, because then they just feel like, oh, I'm a user and I'm going to use what you have created, as opposed to being like, no, I can help, I can add a little bit in here, and that's going to actually enhance everybody's enjoyment, and it's going to take weight off the GM at the same time. So I really want to focus on that concept that everybody at the table can create and add stuff to the story, and it become valuable and important to the story. Because at the end of the day, if a player creates a thing, they're going to care about it more. And if I am the GM, and if we take D&D because everyone knows, and I say,
Yeah.
here is an evil necromancer, everybody goes, yep, cool, evil necromancer, let's go off and kill the evil necromancer, fine. But if a player goes, oh, I'm going to make an evil necromancer, then that player will care more about the necromancer that they made because they made it. And so when we engage against that necromancer, that player's going to be like, well, I made this necromancer. I made his name Rob, and I made him have male pattern balding, like whatever it might happen to be. There's little that the engagement is going to be so much higher because the players put it there themselves rather than being dictated to from that traditional GM standpoint. Not to say a traditional GM is entirely bad, but I think it is a slightly older pattern of gaming that I think has really some great strong points for certain styles of gaming, especially in say the OSR sphere or like proper dungeon crawl type gaming,
Yeah, yeah.
where information is hidden. But if you want to create a collaborative story at the table, which is not a dungeon crawl, those are different games. They're practically not like those sorts of two different games are very different entirely. Then I think we need to look at, well, what actual game do you want to play? Do you want to play a problem-solving game where you and your buds are fighting against this environment, or do you want to play a game where you're all telling a story together to see what the epic story will be? Because I would say that you can't really have both of those things in a collaborative story environment anyway, particularly easily without there being a bit of conflict. But if everybody is collaborative or everybody agrees that we are playing this sort of into the dungeon, us versus the environment, let's see what happens game, both in then so you don't have this disconnect between what players expect. And I think there's a problem with role playing games, is that people have a disconnect between what they expect and what actually shows up at the table sometimes. I've got off track and I'm rambling now, so please continue, take it from here, Dylan.
No, no, no. It's something that I've learned. Again, I think it's something that you learn passively as you go through the role play life that you do. My first time being on the receiving end of a consent sheet was only a couple of weeks ago, because I, like you, am a lifelong DM, and I've handed out a couple to people who have run different sessions for different games. First timers, big thing for it, obviously, so that we get what's comfortable around the table. But yeah, there's those ideas of like people coming together and like it's. And sorry, we are going to bash on D&D. Anyone who loves D&D out there, we do like the game. It's great. It's very fun.
It's fun. It does what it does well.
Yeah. It's the stereotype tabletop RPG. Like everything that you know about it, lots of things you can be drawn in from other things. So we will use it as our almost scapegoat to throw to every time.
It's what I like to think of as the industry standard.
Yeah.
The industry standard does not mean that it's good at everything. It's just the thing that most people use because as like a shorthand for it. It's like saying something is an esky rather than like a cooler. Esky is a brand, right?
Yep.
Even I, when I tell people what I'm doing, I tell people I'm going to play D&D. I'm not playing D&D. I'm playing a game I wrote, but I call it D&D. So yeah, it is the industry standard. So yeah,
I'm guilty of that myself. Yeah, play a D&D. Look, it's all well. Like, I really enjoy the fact that we do that there is that space for it and creativity, and like I think it's good for like I said, I've worked with actors, screenwriters, and stuff to just play D&D, actual D&D, and it's a good place to sort of like get the creative juices going in a whole different flow, which I think is something that you don't get from a lot of other games or even like disciplines across table, like the creative space at all. Like a lot of people, I think, might see this as being very avenue. Like you're like, oh, you like this thing or that thing, which I think is really it's the wrong perspective. I think we have such a unique experience with so many unique people coming into the space that it can only get better, which is the most fascinating thing. Like every day I read about something cool and new. And like you say, creating monsters. Oh, I've created a handful in my day. And honestly, it is the most fun throwing it against the players. And it's lots of fun watching them just tear it to pieces and like find the loopholes and do things. Like it's that mix of creative, because it's not something they've seen in the monster manual or one of the like adjacent books. Like it's something new, bringing this life and creativity in problem solving in whole different ways.
And you invested in that by designing it, and they get to experience the thing that you personally designed. And so you get that, there's an additional level of enjoyment. I think that designers can get. Although we also do suffer a whole bunch of pain of looking at our stuff going, that doesn't work. So,
yeah.
But it is the that's the nature of playtesting and whatnot. So yeah,
that's it. Yeah, I mean, speaking of designers, man, like you've been a designer for, like you say, a long time.
Yeah,
going back, going all the way back there to your first
like I don't know, 2012 maybe, something like that was when I first designed it. I'd have to even have a look. But
it's hard to remember anymore, man. It gets so meshed in with all the other great memories and things you create. You're just like, it doesn't even matter anymore, man. I get to just be creative because I love it. So if you could go back to day one, so making your first magic item, and whether it's like from your experiences creating knights, like your first game out there to get put together, built out there, and you're out there selling it now. You guys should check it out as well. I have not had a chance yet to buy it, but I have watched a playthrough and checked out the ruling sets for it. It does look very fun, and I have a couple of people lined up that are probably going to enjoy it for different reasons. But I look forward to having a chat with you after I actually get a chance to play it. So yeah, it's going to be a fun experience.
Nice. So go back to day one.
What would you tell yourself? What was the one piece that you could do?
When I first started designing properly, rather than just for home games and stuff, I would just tell myself to just like simmer back and woe down, simmer down and woe back, because I got so excited that I would release products that honestly I would come back 2 weeks later and go, hang on, no, that doesn't work for whatever reason, this reason or that reason. Okay, so I just get so excited and caught up in it that it's not that anything was bad, it's just that I didn't give it, that I'd come back to it later and go, oh wait, I can make it better. I wish I had already made it better. So this happened to me in the first edition of Night. There's no real mechanical differences between the two things, but I learned a lot in the creation of the first edition of Night, and then the after effects of that and that sort of learning process. So that several months later, I did like a reprint, and it's kind of a second edition. It just had a lot more stuff in it, a lot more art, a lot more design choices, a lot more structure for the players to engage with. And so And so what I had, so if I went back in time, I would say just simmer down. I know you're excited. Just give it a little bit more time. Have a considered deep think about what it is that you're what it is that you're doing, and throw it up against people and have them come back to tell you what it goes like, and just give it a little bit more time to percolate to become the best wine that it can be, rather than maybe giving it out just a little bit too early. And that would be what I would tell myself.
Okay, time. Look. I feel like you and I have had plenty of conversations about many things, and time is one of those things that I suffer with. Like I'm terrible at sort of getting these things together. Just putting this together. It took me about a day or so to sort of get like the audio, the lighting, the camera, and the scening and all that set up. And I looked
Mm-hmm.
at it and I'm like, cool. I'm gonna shut it off. It's about 4 o'clock, and tomorrow I'll get up, have a cup of coffee, and I'm gonna look at it again. And I was just like, how did I get this far down the rabbit hole without being like, oh geez, why did I do this? This doesn't look any good. Like it's just that time to sort of like fresh pair of eyes, and like between like collaborative stuff, especially when you've got friends, communities that also create these things that can give you the advice or have that fresh pair of eyes. Like I think that that's definitely something that I think a lot of creatives in all walks of life can definitely look at. I had a friend release a novel last year, and he's like, yeah, I had to like take it, tear it into two halves because no publisher will look at it if it's over a certain size. And I sort of tore it down the middle, and I was like, yeah, I was happy here. And he went out and was like almost ready to get it printed, and then he reread both halves. He's like, no, this is terrible. I need to move it like 2 chapters this way, and then that's the book. But that could have been, a disaster of like a whole printing process for a book he wasn't happy with, and then didn't end on the right cliffhanger. And I'm still dying to get the second part of it because, oh man, it's very good. Drago, if you're watching, I want that book as soon as you can give it to me, man. It's excellent. But it's in that same vein. Like I think that you create, like you said, percolate, get the best wine out of it that you can. Well, I like that. I like that. So we looked at like you building games, and through that talk about prototyping, playtesting, getting pieces together. How do you do that? I mean, obviously back in the day it would have been ridiculously hard. You talk about finding people to talk about it, let alone play-test it.
I mean, I only really started designing in that sort of, I don't know, mid-ish 2010s sort of space. So it wasn't that bad. It wasn't like back in the 90s or earlier where they had to sort of, I don't know, like, I don't know, use the wooden block printing press back in those days. But, it wasn't that bad. But there was actually a lot of stuff that has always been available to help stuff out. But in terms of prototyping it, what I used was for nights. All my other stuff was digital, and I think digital is a super easy way to just throw stuff out there, just to get something reasonably looking out there. And you can use a lot of programs. I use Adobe InDesign, but it's pretty expensive. There's another one called Affinity, which I'm probably going to move to because it's not as expensive. But you use these layout design programs because I don't know how many people just use Microsoft Word to write all their stuff on, but I've actually moved away from using that altogether. So I just write the stuff directly into the layout programs because of the way that I want, because I want to direct the salience of where my words are on the page and how it's directed and any art that I put in there. I want to direct the readers as I'm doing it. So I just do that nowadays, but initially I just used a bunch of Microsoft Word programs and printed them off on Microsoft Word and stuff like that. But when I finally got ready for actually releasing my programs, the I went through DriveThruRPG, and they were pretty reasonable. I know there's some cheaper ones, but being here in Australia, we have the biggest problem. We have a tyranny of distance issue, which is that the majority of our clients, our buyers, are going to be from the US, and it's just where they're going to be, relatively speaking. Like my Kickstarters, I would say 90% of people, 95% of people were all in the US. Now, if I prototype a thing, sure, I can ship it to myself here, and that'll cost me, maybe $20 or something like that for a prototype thing, and that's fine. But then you got to pay your shipping and stuff on top of it, and that's another like $15. And then if you have an issue with your prototype, then you got to go and fix it, and then give yourself another prototype, right? So that's so I've got several copies of the first edition of Night that I've gone, flick through, there's an error, and I hadn't seen it on the digital documents, and that's pretty standard, but that's just the nature of it. I use DriveThruRPG because they've got a pretty reasonable method of not just getting me prototypes and they just charge pretty much at cost. I don't have to pay them all that much money. But the best thing that I had for any of that is that because we got this tyranny of distance, I just put the stuff up there, and then all the backers that have all their email addresses or whatever, and then I just plug that into DriveThruRPG, and then it prints it from the nearest printer, which is a US printer, and then mails it to them. So their shipping is lower. So therefore, I don't have to charge a ridiculous shipping of getting a whole bunch of them printed, sent to me personally, and then me using Ozpost to mail them back to the US at an additional $25 a head. It just didn't make much sense to me. So in terms of getting my stuff to the backers at any rate, I just use that DriveThruRPG. It's not necessarily the cheapest, but it overcame my problem of that transportation logistical cost. So I know other people have done better ones, but and maybe have a better idea of how to do it. But that was just the solution that I had. I guess in terms of other prototyping and layout sort of stuff, the only other thing is that you can also go to Officeworks and just print out a super cheap copy for yourself, and they can bind it in different ways. But I tried not to do that, even though probably I should have, because I wanted to see what the final copy looked like in my hands. Whereas I probably should have printed a cheaper one just so I could get that physical paper. Because I printed it out just on a normal printer. I printed it out and gone through it, and it wasn't until I got that prototype that I saw the errors and saw the misalignment of the text. Because when you're first getting used to those layout programs, I just didn't. You can read all the stuff in the world, but it didn't sink into my head until I paid the cost in cash to learn the hard way exactly what that meant, right? So you can research it and just follow the guides online rather than doing it my way and go, it looks fine on the screen. Well, no, you end up paying an idiot tax, which I've paid many, many times in my life. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it's one of those things, like lesson learned. Like you've gone through different prototyping steps, different phases, and found things that work, that didn't work, and finding guides in that. And these days it's so easy. Like I can't imagine back then. I mean, I guess prototyping with what you do would be majoritively text on images on pages and stuff. So that sort of thing I can understand if you're wanting to do digital distribution. So easy to make edits, changes. You can just get it out to as many people as possible. They can read it, they can give you feedback, they can love it. They can buy it from you, obviously, if you've got a trial versus a paid version. So yeah, absolutely. When coming to non-physical stuff, and I mean, if they love it that much, they're willing, or you have connections to do a hardcover copy, which I mean, every tabletop RPG nerd I know in the sphere, they love having their bookshelf. I have a shelf dedicated to my tabletop roleplay game books, and it's maybe a couple of other shelves maybe as well. So yeah, there's always the possibility for that down the road, but getting it out there, getting it tested, that's the most important thing. Making sure you've got something out there that people love and want to play. And even if they don't, at least you get something cool out of it.
Yeah, definitely. The thing with play testing is I find interesting because how can I put this? I play test with my friends, and they are kind, loving souls who don't want me to feel bad if something bad is happening, and they're more likely to be very cautious in any criticism that they do. Now, this takes place with pretty much every designer and every design that or criticism that I've given. These things are important to us. So when we play test stuff, it's easy to feel a real kick in the guts when someone doesn't like your work. But the criticism that they give back to you does not always actually need changing. It's just like a personal preference. So there's a lot of understanding of going, okay, did this person just not particularly enjoy this aspect because they want something different, and they just don't enjoy what I'm offering? Or is, in terms of play testing, is it a genuine critical error in my system that I genuinely need to take? And taking, it's great to the idea of being just remove emotion out of it. You can't remove emotion out of it. These things are labors of love. I'm not doing this for an economic reason at the end of the day. I mean, sure, I'd love to. My next Kickstarter, it makes millions and I retire. Sure, that'd be wonderful. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to create the best products that I can. I'm also trying to and a little bugbear here of all of these people who put their stuff up on Kickstarter and don't actually have it finished. So this annoys me, but I also try to have a product as finished or as near as possible to be finished when I'm actually at that crowdfunding level as well. So I do all my playtesting beforehand. It does seem like a lot of those groups, and they always have the extra levels, and so their fulfillment is very slow because they then need to like add this or add that to their crowdfunding campaigns or whatnot. But so I really want to have my thing fully play tested, fully ready to go. So the moment that my crowdfunding finishes, I mail it out to them. So everybody should be getting my stuff straight away. That being said, though, maybe that's just me not doing it the right way, economically speaking. But yeah, in terms of like play testing, I really play test a lot. I play full campaigns, usually multiple campaigns through, just to really bring all of my rules to, for maximum. I want to throw everything at the wall and see what fits. And then to basically go back in with a battle axe basically and chop anything down that does not need to be there, because my style of gaming is I really want to be efficient, and I would find that good writing is efficient writing that doesn't waste the players and GM's time, because you're not there. If you're reading a game of rules, you're reading rules of a game, you're not there to enjoy my prose, right? I'm writing a technical document. Okay, so if I'm writing a technical document, I want to get my idea to your brain in the most efficient and effective way possible. So if there is some sort of if my writing has clouded or is confusing, then I have made a horrible error and need to chop that down. And I think that that's what playtesting can do, because I not only do I play through, I send out all of my documents to other designers and stuff, and they will come up going, I didn't understand this or I didn't understand that, and they go, okay, so if I need to explain it with my words, then I have made an error in my work and I need to change what I am doing. So I guess that's my process for for doing that. I know some people play test a lot longer than I do, but I usually play several campaigns through of any of my stuff just to make sure all of my stuff is working well. And that's prior to actually sort of delivering anything. And I'm usually play testing, getting prototypes, and then setting up for any crowdfunding or whatever later on. So I guess
How do you?
does that answer your question?
Yeah. The query app is like, how do you make that transition? Like, how do you know when you're ready to move to the next step? Whether that's crowdfunding, whether that's like ready to print, like, how do you qualify that for yourself?
Okay, so I want to have finished my playtesting, gone to the end of a campaign, and everyone's gone, yes, that's worked.
Okay.
At the end of the day, playtesting is just you're testing out each of the aspects of your game. And so I could test part A of my game one day and part B of my game another day. And if they both work, then that's fine. But I really want to play the whole thing through fully, usually multiple times. Though role-playing games, that's difficult. Board games, okay, so you can play test a board game, it takes you 3 hours, and you can do that 6 weeks in a row, where you have now tested all of your rules. But role-playing games, especially campaign ones, are really designed for a much larger experience, so it's hard to do that. But I want to be able to go through, yes, this works. I want to have been able to send it to other people, and they say yes, this works, and I understand what's going on. And only when I've done that and I've gone, every part of this I'm happy with, I can't read any part of this and go, I'm uncomfortable with that. If I find that I'm uncomfortable with something, then I need to change it. So, and then that's when I start the crowdfunding and Kickstarter process, because that's a bit of a different. You sort of got to take off your designer hat and then sort of more put on a business hat to go, well, at the end of the day, what do I want? Well, I really would like as much money as possible, sure, but this also equals more people having my book, because what I want is people to have my book in their bookshelf and go, that's a cool book, that's what I want. And I had one of those personal moments of absolute love the other day, because I was at a convention, and one of the people there had been playing Knight with their kids and their whole family, and their kids was like excitedly telling me about all the murderous rampage that their character had got up to. And the dad had been running it, and he was standing there, and then and the dad had like carved a wooden sword to be the same sword as what their son's character had with all his lightning bolts engraved on it and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like,
That's
wow, this is amazing.
amazing.
My game has created this story, this atmosphere, this love for the setting in this other family, and so that was wonderful for me. And I realized that yeah, sure, everyone wants money, and I would like money. If you want to give me money, please do. But what I also want is that people look at my book and appreciate my book, and if they play my game, that'd be really good too. So that's what I really want out of it.
I find that I get that answer a lot from people in here with what we do in, like, obviously, because we have a marketplace for independent games. It's about buying, selling games. Like that's the point of it all. You know, is to bring out independence and stuff that don't get a lot of love in a lot of other places, and give them the experience that you've had, because that's heartwarming. That's got to feel great. It's got to feel like I get that feeling when like we'll go out with friends, and some of the people that I play with, they'll share stories with people who've never played D&D, who are like, oh, what's it like? And they'll tell stories about stuff that we've done, great encounters, characters, NPCs. I'll spill a little one here that always ends up at the start, end of a night, doesn't matter. It always throws in there. I had a character, so I had the big bad lich as the evil bad guy at the end of my campaign. I know, very on the nose, but look, it was my first time. And I wanted to do something interesting with the phylactery. And I actually found an old thing about a living spellbook. So a person that was personifying a spellbook for a very powerful wizard, and a friend that they had for probably about 2 years of like out of game time. They loved this character, always used him, called him in for help, and then they found out eventually that he was the phylactery and like a permanent walkie-talkie to the lich. And
wow.
I'd never seen such vitriol looked at me across the table for just the realization. Like, someone made a joke about, oh, what if this character is this? And I didn't say anything, and they all just looked deadpan. Like, I'd never heard crickets so quickly at a table. But that to me was, even though like I hope never to have that look given to me again. Actually, I kind of do, for the same experience, that feeling.
Yeah, you've caused an emotional reaction in your players, and if we imagine that our game is also kind of art, then what we're trying to do is elicit some form of emotion from our audience, of our players, right? If you get an emotion, then you've succeeded at the job. So yeah, you kind of do.
Yeah, and the fact they talk about it whenever they mention how much they love and hate the characters that I create, because they're so memorable in some ways, and then they're so hated in others. Like, I think that's I think that's in this. Like, you love that feedback. You want that sort of, like, not even validation. You just want to bring that fun and experience that you've had to somebody else. And I think that's one of the greatest things about this sort of this hobby, this creative, whether you want to make a business for it, make $1 million, like you say, or just make some cool stuff. So yeah, that's really interesting. Like, from, you talk about doing a crowdfunding and that, how's that experience been for you? I've heard many mixed things, and I don't doubt that people listening to this might be thinking about it to be their avenue for like funding their first game, their 10th game or whatever. So how's your experience been with it, man?
Look, it's the best way I know of to get a lot of eyes on your product. And I don't have a great skill set in creating a large online presence, or social media, or any of those other things that people do. Some of the other designers in Australia are amazing, like the Story Gamers guys. They are absolutely incredible. They are the best at that, and obviously they're now professional game designers, and that's what they do because they are really good at that. But even they use crowdfunding to be able to do this. So I think that we need to understand that crowdfunding is the way to go forward if you want more games and more people to buy your games. The idea of going to retail is it just doesn't seem to work. Now, I called at one point. I was on a big marketing kick, and I called probably 300 different places, all over Australia, and I sold maybe 20 books. And this was days of effort, email chains, all the rest of that sort of stuff.
Damn.
And I thought, this is not really worth the amazing amount, like the time and effort that I put in. And because a lot of these people are just no, and I understand this because their business, like role playing books, don't make retail any money. So they don't
Unfortunately not, yeah.
really stock them. So they don't want to stock independent games because like they might. We have a couple of great independent game stockists around Brisbane, and I know there's definitely some in Melbourne as well. But
Heaps,
again,
yeah, it's great.
they're a tiny fraction. They're a tiny fraction of overall the games sort of market. And of all of these game stores out there, if I sell a copy of one of my games to somewhere that mainly features magic and maybe holds the Dungeons and Dragons books, they don't really make any money even on the Dungeons and Dragons books, relatively speaking, and they will fly off the shelves compared to what my game will do because of the nature of the game. So the idea of having your book in retail in a retail thing, well, that's nice. But it's also more expensive because then you also need to factor in that there's a retail person involved, so costs go up and that sort of. So retail, I don't believe that retail usually is the way that that people will either come across the book or will feature the majority of independent publishers. I'd love to be proved wrong, and I'd love for everyone to stock Night, and it would be a wonderful sensation for me to see, and I really do love it when the local stores around here actually have my book, but and that's great. But honestly, to be fair, those guys are doing me a favor. They're doing me a favor because they want to support an independent designer who is a local, and so they bought a heap of copies off me, and that's great, and that's part of their business, and so they're wonderful people, and I love them, but of the 20 odd stores in Brisbane, they're the only one that really did it, right? So,
Yeah.
so I don't think retail is the way. The idea of going and selling stuff at conventions doesn't really work because people are really busy doing a bunch of other stuff at conventions. You might sell a few copies, but you're never going to make your main thing, and then that's your job then, going from convention to convention to try to sell your stuff, and that doesn't suit my lifestyle or anything
Having
like
a wife
that.
and kids doesn't seem like it, no.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'd love it.
I'm not going to be able to do it that way. So the only real way to do it is through stuff like Indiverse, I guess. I'm hopeful once it's on there that you make me millions of dollars. But
look, I'm trying, man. I'm trying my best.
crowdfunding is where you'll get a lot of people who have cash to burn and are just willing to throw some cash out there to try something new because that's that's the vibe of what they do. They'll see stuff come up on their feed, it'll be recommended. You pay a few marketing people to go and spruik some stuff on Facebook for you, and more eyes will see it. And that is the biggest place that eyes will see it. After crowdfunding, man, it's really going to drop off. Okay, so that's the big thing. You're going to do your crowdfunding, and then you'll make a bit of money if it's successful, and then after that, you'll be supporting your game and you might play some games, but there's always going to be the next big thing, the next big game out there. So the idea would be that maybe some will buy it on these online platforms or something like DriveThru or Indiverse or any of these other things. They might sell it, and I still get money. Every month, I get a couple $100 just based off people buying digital copies of Night mainly. But that's not like big money or anything. So you got to think, okay, so the big money really is in the crowdfunding, either in directly in that, or just what I've seen a few people do is just do like reprints of what they've already done, just to see if they can generate some more revenue. So just to get the amount of eyes with people who are willing to pay cash on to basically fork that cash out early because they've seen your Kickstarter page or your BackerKit page or whatever, and they go, yeah, I'm really keen on that, and they'll put down that money, and then by the end of your campaign, you've made some cash out of it. And I think that's the majority of where indie games will make them, if they're looking to make some sort of profit, or if they're looking to try to recoup their sort of their outlay. That would be where they most of that will come from, and that would be my impression. I'm sure some people will get it wrong, that I will get it wrong, I should say. I'm sure people will disprove me on that. And I'm sure board games are a different market entirely, but at least for tabletop role-playing games, I do believe fully that that Kickstarting is or crowdfunding is the way to have that splurge of cash that you're just not going to see through just putting it up on an online platform.
Yeah, that's one of the big things that, and not to go too under the hood for everyone at home for Indieverse, that's one of those things that we've seen in the challenge. Like, you talk about crowdfunding, and I spoke about it earlier. It's a phenomenal place to get, and you say eyeballs on just what you do as well. And because there is so many people, they have like mailing lists saying, "Hey, you've bought this game, you've backed this game, you might like this other game that's out there," and they do that as just part of that, like the automated process. They get you to more games and more eyes on it. I love that. That's the space that we've got to, because it means that you don't have to go out and be a professional social media person, like you said. You don't have to go out and like you can go pay people to put stuff on Facebook, you can start an Instagram, you can do all those things, and they can get you out there. But you are right. When I talk to people about post Kickstarter, there isn't that space that's like, where's that same focus, suggestion? Like, it doesn't exist somewhere else. Like, we have people who go to like Etsy. I talked to someone who was selling stuff on Square the other day, which I thought was like mainly for restaurants, and they even described what the back end like was like putting together a burger, like it was like toppings and additions and stuff, and it's nuts. And I just like, I think that's sort of the loop that we get into. And while I wouldn't demonize people for going back into the crowdfunding loop again and again and again, it kind of, I found that for the questions and a lot of the responses they get from the community is like, it doesn't look like or feel like they have like themselves, if they want to say they're economically motivated, they want a big studio, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. Let's be realistic. It's 2024.
We all want $20 million and retire, so we can just make games for fun.
Yeah, that's it. That's the dream. But then they like the crowdfunding, the reprint idea. I think is like probably it's a little bit of a newer one, and I've really enjoyed seeing that as well. Like that sort of like bridges that gap of like, I can't go crowdfund a game I've already made, a version 2. Sure, we can make it, but if you already have something that's fantastic, don't break what's not broken, fix what's not broken, something like that. Yeah, so it sort of falls into that trap. And that's sort of the inspiration that we took to sort of be like, well, why don't we make that? Like, because crowdfunding gives you, I'd say, that limited lifespan of like a product in like, unless you're doing it, like you say, a reprint or another product, like it sort of just ends after that crowdfunding. You can go sell it and that, but then it's like, well, it's not on Kickstarter, so like it's not just for board games, so it's not that trustworthy. And then GameFound they've sort of taken away just that board game part away from Kickstarter and been like, this is what we're going to focus on. And they've had amazing success in the space there, and they've been here for half the time, and that focus there is really just on tabletop. So I think that that's going to be one of the things that through the next couple of years, that whether it's through Kickstarter, through GameFound, or even through Indiverse, or I found so many like crowdfunding platforms in like the time that I've been like researching independent games, and that I'm glad that there is like hopefully that evolution coming, so people can take what they've built and amazing stuff like and have somewhere to put it, whether or not, again, it makes them millions of dollars. It doesn't cost a lot to do online stores, but again, finding some place that's good for you to do that is the challenge that we find a lot of places. And mostly we've spoken to board games. There aren't as many people who like to dip their insanity that much like you or I into creating tabletop roleplay games. The balance is a little bit skewed. But yeah, it definitely is one of those challenges. It's not, there's no perfect solution just yet. I think as we grow and change as a community, and I think some of the education pieces that, not to sort of predate some future things we've got coming for this sort of interview format podcast that we're doing, we have some people who have some real advice from a business perspective around how to make yourself a success. And if you were economically, not the world, you're a creative guy, so I reckon you could probably just pluck this one out. If you were economically sort of minded in the tabletop roleplay space, because I haven't heard from someone in this space, how would you approach it? What would you do?
Could you rephrase that question for me?
Okay, so if you were looking to make from Night, you were printing it out tomorrow, and you were deciding crowdfunding's done, you wanted some place to put it, but you wanted to make sure people knew it was there. So you got the eyeballs on it, so people would come and buy it. They'd see the Let's Plays and stuff on it. How would you do that nowadays?
How would I do that now? See, that's a hard question because it's difficult to answer. My hope is that I can put it up somewhere, drive-through or Indiverse or somewhere, and they would link onto those things, and then somehow, whether I pay additional money for marketing, but the problem is after a game and its Kickstarter done, marketing money might be very bad money spent, right? So that's if I spend $1,000 on marketing a game that after its Kickstarter is done, I cannot see that I'll get a return on investment on that money. So what I want to do, I mean, I'm lazy. What I want to do is put it somewhere and it just passively makes me income forever. That's what I really want. But I don't
Yeah.
think that's reasonable as such. But what could I actually do? Do I throw money at it? Because if I throw money at it, is that money not just basically spiraling down the drain? Because it's not really going to be, can I see any proof anywhere that other people have marketed and done that? Because I don't see a lot of marketing other than like in-store marketing type of thing. Like, drive-through has like their deal of the day
Yeah,
or
yeah,
idea.
yeah, yeah.
So they have that, sure. But is it worthwhile me spending an extra $50, $100, $1,000? Will I get more money back than what I put in? Is there any evidence that it will? I don't know. No one that I've come across has actually ever told me that. So I'm at that point where either what I do is I consider doing some form of reprint of Night. Well, I've got a new game at the moment, so that's the one that I'd be going for. And then I'd attach Night as an additional purchase to that as a crowdfunded thing.
Oh, yeah.
When you go in there and you go, okay, well, you want to buy my new game? We'll buy that one, and then if you want to, you could also go buy that one, and that's a possible as well. But I don't know how strong that would make it as such. But yeah, that would be my only idea, because otherwise I put these things up on drive-through or Indiverse or wherever, and I sit and I hope. so that's where I'm at from there.
Yeah, sorry, that was a tough question, and I don't expect anyone who's listening, or even yourself or myself, to come up with the perfect solution now. But I think that it's about the things that we learn from as we create that help the next people, or even ourselves, sort of get to that next step. And I think that's one of the big things that we want to really shout out for this program is like, it's never going to be perfect, it's never going to be easy, and your ideas are probably not going to be the best ones, nor is any single person's. But we will work on trying to get something, whatever that looks like, out there. And it's just about getting eyeballs, and how we do that and how we create that sort of hype around stuff that's been out for like a couple of years, whether it's brand new, like that's really important. So yeah, look, maybe if we do this again, man, maybe might have some time to brainstorm, come up with some better ideas. But yeah, look, the tabletop roleplay space is even smaller than board games, like I said. So yeah, it's an even tougher spot to do it. So look, we're hoping to find the answer in the end, but sometimes it is a little bit luck. Everyone says that as well. Like, it's more luck than skill. So
yeah, can be. I think if I look at the storytellers, they're very highly skilled. They know what they're doing, and they know how to do it. So their skill levels are. You can see their high success. Their Kickstarters keep them in a professional gaming business, and they've got their niche of that sort of feminine focused fantasy, gaming, they are very strong on that. On that area, which is not a niche taken up by any other thing that I've seen. So they have like the Jane Austen RPG, or I can't remember what it was, but yeah, something like that. Little Women, I think, RPG,
yep.
and stuff like that. No one else is doing anything like that, but that's not the only thing. If I released Little Women, the RPG, on Kickstarter before they did, I wouldn't have had the amount. So they have that social connection. Everyone says that, but that's a skill set that I don't really have, nor do I have the time to develop it. So my problem is, well, either I invest heavily into a potentially thing that won't help me all that much, which I then need to maintain, is my big problem. Sure, you could learn to do it, you could establish it, but maintaining it, well, that's a problem, because I still have the rest of my job and my life that I need to deal with. This is a part-time thing. So, if you're full-time, you've definitely got the time to be able to produce those things. So that's the problem. If you have enough money, then you can spend more. You can spend your time and effort continuing to do that. But if you don't, you kind of basically got to throw your ball at the hoop and then hope. So
Yeah, you talk about it being full time as well, but when you start talking about full time, like you're sort of like all in there. So like the amount of money you invest and then like the return, like you talked about before, like that's even more important. So like it's a whole different set of problems that you deal with when you do full time. And I met them at the same time I met yourself, actually, up at Tabletop Convention in Queensland.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
They are amazing. The pair of them that I met, amazing. The games, they're not in a wheelhouse that I thought I'd ever find myself, but you are right. They are completely unique. The storytellers, they have a fantastic
incredible
everything.
People and incredible games.
Yeah. I really look forward to hopefully reaching out to them and bringing them onto the program as well, because I would want to pick their brains so much on like the different areas that they hero so well. Like the social media thing for you, like you say, it's not for everyone. And at some point, like there are some things that you do that go into that social media space that aren't part of the personality of the person who does the creative things. Like
Yeah.
I'm a part of the team at Indieverse here, and I work with Hayden and Josh, and neither of them could jump on and do this interview thing, but I could not do what they do at all. Like there is like it's that skill set thing. And if you're a new designer, you're one person, maybe two, three, if you've got a couple of people who want to throw in together and create it, not necessarily always going to be that person. So it's like that luck, skill, throwing the ball to the hoop, and then everything else in between. So yeah, it is definitely something that's going to be, I don't know, do you become like, is there going to be a new role or a new job out there that's just like board game advertiser, like purely for the independent space? Is it a thing?
Independent board game advertiser. Well, maybe there will be for you guys. Maybe that's another position that you guys could invent.
I'll put it on the end of my resume. Got it done. Easy. Oh look, if nothing else, if this is the sort of avenue that helps you get that name out there, look, I'm happy to take that journey with you, man. It's always good having a chinwag with yourself. Yeah. Well, before we finish up, is there anything else you wanted to sort of shout out, hero, talk about before we end up, or?
Anything that I'd like to hero? Just all the independent game designers that are around, and you can usually meet them at your local conventions and stuff, and usually games aren't too expensive. So every indie designer out there is putting their heart on their sleeve. So please do. If you are looking at this and you go to a convention and you see a game you're even half interested, please pay them their $10 or their $20 or whatever for their game, and it will absolutely be your contribution to that will be the thing that helps grow the sphere. To actually go buy those games, not just because even if you don't think that you'll play that game, you might enjoy the concept of reading it, and even reading it, you might take it back to your own game and learn something from that process. It might just be something interesting, and if everybody just does that, think of it as donating to the community, and by doing that, we'll grow it, and then we'll see absolutely fantastic things come out of it. So. Because there's so much skill and talent, and I'm a middle-aged man. I'm a middle-aged white guy. I'm not hitting at the top. My games are just hitting squarely in the mid, right? So, but there's absolute genius people out there, and if you pay them if you pay them for their $10 game and their little pamphlet on how to play Transcendent Angels in Space or something like that, you will be rewarded, and you will see something special and something amazing you never would have seen before. So.
Look, I encore for that. Like, I'm 100% on board as well. I have only been in the tabletop space as a profession for about 6 or 7 months or so, and I cannot speak to how amazing and how friendly and welcoming and willing to contribute and collaborate everyone in this space is, whether they do like tabletop games, tabletop roleplay games, even just novels, like stuff adjacent to stuff that we all love. Like, everyone out there is just 100%, like top notch human beings all the way through. So yeah, give them their love, and you said it'll share that experience. You will honestly, the amount of times I've gone to conventions or events and like people like, I sold 3 copies, and they are over the moon. Like, it doesn't even cover the cost of them getting there, putting the fuel in their car, taking the train, whatever they're doing. It does not matter. Just that experience, just the fact that you are willing to be like, yes, what you have created, all that love you put into it, I want to take some of that too.
Is worth usually not very much money, and they're happy to pay, and they're happy to take that. So it's really it really means a lot to people to hear that, and even if you don't have the cash, just talking to them about their game and being interested in their game will light up someone's day. So definitely have a chat. Don't just walk past those tables with hungry looking indie game designers. Actually go up and have a chat to them, and you'll have a great time.
Yeah. I can say it is definitely the fact. They will talk your ear off about it, and it's great to see. It's great to see the passion and the enjoyment for just what they do and what they love. So yeah, go do it. Go to your events, buy some indie games, find something new. If you're a creative, go out there. You might find a new mechanic, a new theme, a new thing you didn't even know existed. I'm doing it and finding out that I actually am a creative because of people like Mark and people that we've spoken to. So thank you so much, man, for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I have no doubt that you and I will share many more conversations about tabletop roleplay games as I go on my little adventure, and hopefully learn a little bit about your making too. So again, Mark Beren, everybody, Armoured Gaming. Knight's a great game that I haven't played yet that I totally will. And I look forward to the Samurai game, man. I have the little bits that you... Yeah.
Yeah. I get paid for killing, and a lot of people in this town deserve to die. That's my new title.
Oh, I love it. I can't wait. I cannot wait. It is going to be a fun time for anyone who loves their I'd say 80s, 90s, and 2000s inspired action kung fu samurai movies. It's right up your alley. Awesome.
Thanks so much, Dylan. You're an amazing fellow. Thank you for the interview.
No worries, man. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Everybody. See you later.